Just like to get started by saying hello to everybody. I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. This beautiful Easter day, the day of resurrection. What a perfect day to talk about reality and the nature of who and what we are as here. I'd also like to especially thank Gigi for putting this together. But before we get started, I want to check and make sure that everybody can hear me. Is there anybody that cannot hear me? All right. Excellent. Excellent. So, without further ado, let's get metaphysical up in this bitch. The nature of reality. There are so many different dimensional layers of experience to talk about this thing that we call reality. And I think to get at the underlying understanding, there's a physicist that coined it perfectly. He said there is an infinitude of facts that you can experience. Let's say the fact is that when you drop a carrot, it falls. But when you discern the underlying law that governs these facts, you create a new context through which to understand the medium of experience. When you come to understand the law of gravity, then all the facts of falling objects comes into context, and you have a new expanded awareness as to the nature of your reality. And so, within these dimensional layers of experience that we love to call our reality, this thing that becomes preconditioned, and within these dimensional layers, there's an underlying association with each one. And I like to refer to this as what I call the archetypes of experience. Now, what do I mean by archetypes of experience? It's a very archaic word. And I first came into contact with this terminology when I was studying tarot. My Aunt Penny asked me if I would write a book of tarot for her, so I started researching what the tarot cards were and what they meant, and I discovered that each tarot card was an archetype. And by archetype, I mean it was this symbol for a state of being through which we experience reality. And I'll give a very base example of this. As we experience the beginning of this lifetime, we'll go back to the beginning of the parameter within this lifetime. So let's say there's the dimension of the experience of sound. We perceive the fluctuations within the pressure of air, and we interpret it as a sound. Now, somebody, when they were little, pointed to something that was green, the color green, the dimensional visual experience of green, and they created the sound green. And you created the correlation of the dimension of experience of sound with the visual experience of green. There was a correlated experience. So now when you heard the fluctuations in the air, when you heard that noise, you had a cross-dimensional correlation to attach it to. So now there was both a visual and an auditory. And as we have experiences, we create these correlated patterns. We create this correlated matrix that begins to define the filter of our reality. And it goes much deeper and deeper into the different dimensional layers of experience. That's a very base example of just the physical and visual dimension of experience, what we call the physical experiences, which is a very narrow parameter of experiencing. And so we slowly evolve this parameter of reality through these correlated experiences, and we hold them as attachments of experience or memories within the boundary of this lifetime. And as it evolves, we begin to create a broader and broader view, a more expanded state of being, an archetype of interrelated, correlated conscious experiences that create our reality. Because everything we experience, we are experiencing through the medium of our identity, which is the accumulation of all of our experiences and all of the cross-dimensional correlations inherent within these archetypes as we slowly evolve. And this is very important because many people, with all these new age spiritual understandings and teachings coming out and the new breakthroughs in scientific technology and research, we're beginning to understand ourselves as unified beings of infinite source energy. But it seems to be that no matter how much we understand this, we still experience life through the illusion of separation. We still experience life as the finite. We still experience these ethereal, infinite constructs through the parameters of this finite identity. And I'll give an example of that. So let's look at light. When you open your eyes, you are seeing a parameter of the electromagnetic spectrum. This is an infinite spectrum that goes infinitely in either direction. So within this infinite spectrum, we have the parameter called visual light. Within that parameter, we create boundaries, and the boundaries give us distinction, they give us separation. All of a sudden, we have black and white. We have all the lights and none of the lights. We have red and blue. We have high end of the frequency and low end of the frequency. But these parameters can only be created when you limit the infinite spectrum. So in order to understand ourselves within duality, within the dimension that we experience this world through it as now, as we are experiencing it as separate beings, we have to put parameters on the experience of the dimension, or on the dimension of conscious experience. So we have been constricted and very focused in the recent past on the parameters of our physical experience. And we'll call this physical experience the perceivable light. But there are dimensions of experience outside of our visible spectrum, just like the gamma rays and X-rays within the electromagnetic spectrum. However, because we are tuned in and focused within these boundaries of identity, then we create the illusion of separation. Now, as we create these archetypes within the boundary that is life and death, we create a boundary through which to accumulate experiences. And within that boundary, as we accumulate these correlated experiences within the dimensions of perception, we manifest this filter. And though we are creatures of habit, and so though we're just being exposed to these new understandings of unity, of infinity, of our beings as infinite beings of source, we still have these conditioned experiences within the parameter of our identity as being very dense physical beings. And it's latent within every aspect of our culture because of our fixation within the very focused parameter that is the physical senses. And so just coming out, the yogis believe that we have cycles of consciousness, that we go through stages of knowing and stages of unknowing. And as our history shows us, we have just been coming out of a very dense collective cultural ideology where people were very fixated on what they could prove through the material. And that is where the development of science came in. It was a very linear way of beginning to explain who and what we are. And just as within the realm of duality, the non-linear, which has been much better understood in the past, is now beginning to blossom, and we're creating the balanced understanding. So what we're going to be doing today is looking at some of the more linear aspects of who we are as beings so that we can create a balanced perspective and develop the vocabulary to be able to not only create the conditions to create this experience of unity within our lives, but to be able to relate that experience to those we love so that we are not isolated in the development of self. So, as we begin to look at the dimensions of perception, as we look at these correlated conscious matrix that conditions this filter, we can begin to create conditions to step out of the physical perceptions and expand that awareness. And I first had this notion when me and my cousin, he was looking at taking a course, finishing his doctorate at this new university down in Southern California, and it was emphasized on the study of consciousness. It was using a lot of new research equipment in order to measure biomagnetic and biophoton emissions. And in order to do this, they had to create a copper tomb. And what this copper tomb did was it disconnected you from the Earth's biomagnetic frequency so that you could have the environment to study your own, because the Earth's biomagnetic frequency was so much more powerful, it was so distracting that you cannot study the emissions of your own magnetic frequencies without having the environment of stillness, without having an environment that isn't convoluted by distractions. And as we stepped into this tomb, we were getting a tour of the college, and they showed us this tomb, and as we stepped into it, I had a switch in my experience of the subconscious dimension of magnetics. In each individual, we have magnetics within our heart that have sensors, or not magnetics, but we have sensors that can sense magnetics in our heart, and I was never aware of this. And just because I wasn't aware of it, I was still experiencing it. It was still affecting me. Just like with light, even though we don't experience the X-rays and the gamma rays, they're still affecting our reality. They're still interacting with our physiology. And so when I stepped into this copper tomb, there was the environment to create a shift in my perception within the subconscious parameter that was the experience of my magnetic sensor. And so when this happened, I started to become more aware of the magnetic sensor within my heart, and I started correlating these archetypes, these symbols of experience with different situations, with different people, and I began learning more and more about it. And the reason I'm talking about this is because as we create the filter, our identity within the finite parameter of this life, we have been so fixated on this very narrow-minded view of who and what we are within the cultural incentives and so many other contributing factors. So, to apply this to ourselves in our own lives, when I began to meditate, when I began to create the environment to dissolve the distractions that were constantly coming into my sense perceptions, and I create that space of stillness, I was able to then perceive the energetic imprint of those memories in my past. For example, when as I would go deeper and deeper into meditations, I would begin to feel the emotional stimuli that come out of those memories. And in that new state of understanding, in that new state of awareness, I would surrender to the feeling, and I would, instead of thinking of something else or thinking how it shouldn't be a part of me, I would just become present. And I'd become present to my perception. And as that happened, I would begin to feel these emotional...
You disappeared.
Did I?
Yeah, we can't hear you.
Oh my God.
Is you mine?
What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello?
No.
Am I? Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, no.
All right.
Nelly just dropped off right now.
Everybody just dropped off?
No, you did.
Oh yeah, I know. I'm actually not even back on. My call got dropped. I have my mom's phone now.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
Well, it was only about like a minute.
All right. Would you, can you guys let me know what I was talking about when I dropped out?
You had just opened up a new topic when you started meditating.
All right.
I was opening up through your meditation.
All right. Yeah. So just like the copper tomb, as we go into
Right.
the
Okay, everyone can put their phone back on mute.
all right.
Thank you.
All right. Sorry about that, guys. So as the meditation, just like with the copper tomb, it was bringing an environment to myself where the exterior influences were disconnected so that I could be present with the filter of my own emotional stimuli and my own archetypes of experience, as I would call them. And as this would happen, I would begin to experience the memory, or I would re-experience the memory that had created the emotional stimuli, be it fear, be it anxiety. If I felt anxiety, I would open up to it, and as I opened up to it, I would start to relive memories associated with that anxiety. And as I relived them from a new perspective, from a new state of being, from a new archetype of experience, from a new identity. And this is very important, because just like a kid, if a 3-year-old watched a horror movie, and if I watched a horror movie, it'd be a very different movie, because we have different understandings. He would be terrified because he would see that as the real world. Just like people living today, they think that the physical, spatio-temporal, conscious constructs in the now are real. They think that's what they are. Just like the child sees the horror movie as real. They don't see the broader view. Now, as an adult, when I would watch that horror movie, I would know the underlying incentives. I would know that it's a film. I would know that guy just liked to play different characters, and he had to pay rent. And you see all the underlying incentives that drive people to the actions that generate our suffering. Because whenever anybody does anything, it's not what they do that creates suffering within our experience. It's our interpretation of their intention. And when we don't see the underlying subconscious archetypes of experience, the filters through which drive those intentions, the ignorance through which that fear and that anxiety comes through, and then it creates fear and anxiety in our own filter. We create that correlation in our own reality. And so, just as watching a horror movie as a child and as an adult, I was reliving these horrible experiences that I went through as a child as an adult, but I was able to see them through this new expanded awareness. I was able to see them through a new detached parameter. And as this happened, it began dissolving the anxiety associated with the memory. It began dissolving the correlated experience of the fear and the anger in that experience that was correlated with whatever happened, so that when it happens again, the fear and the anxiety that was correlated out of the ignorance of the intention was transformed. And so when we're looking at these archetypes, they create a reality, but they are never fixed. And so they're ever expanding. And the more we attach to them as who we are, the more suffering that is generated when they change. So, the whole idea behind this is to see the underlying structure through which the identity is created, through which our reality is manifested. As this is what the term enlightenment refers to. Enlightenment comes from the notion of bodhi, which is a state of being through which you understand the causal mechanisms of the universe. You understand how these correlated experiences, or these archetypes of experiences, begin to cross-correlate to create the filter of your reality. And in that understanding, you can then create the intention of manifesting these positive experiences that can then lay a foundation for new constructs, new archetypes, new characteristics that develop within our being. So we all have this fundamental understanding that we are one, that we are infinite, that we have spirit, we're one with God. But as we're constantly redirected to the physical within our cultures and within the incentives that underlie our reality, where we're not conditioning the neural pathways to create that experience. And so as we delve deeper into how we construct this, we can then begin to release the attachment to the filter. Though we will always see reality through it, it won't be us. And as that becomes true, it loses the reactive nature, because we are the ones, with our intent, with our understanding, creating the experiences that condition a new way of thinking, a new way of experiencing the formless within ourselves. All of these words that I'm saying, just like the word green, they're symbols, they're archetypes of experience. And as we condition this experience of the formless, as we balance the practice of meditation and the experience, non-linear experience of the formless, with study and understanding as to the linear physical manifestation of reality, we then have a balanced perspective through which now we become the masters of our own creation. We become conscious creators within our own lives. And in that state of being, the powerlessness associated with suffering dissolves. And that's what we're talking about here, people. We're talking transformation. So on any level, it is these conditioned states. As we condition the formless within ourselves, not only will we begin to understand this, but to experience it within the here and now. The formless can be something that will always be pointed to. You can understand it, but to truly grasp your mind around the infinity, you have to enter into that formless state. You have to become the now without any preconceived archetypes. You have to let go of that filter as we move back into the source of our being. And from that source, reclaim the power that is the creative cycle of this moment. And as this begins to happen, there are some very important things that we have to look out for. Because as we begin to expand ourselves and as we begin to condition these new archetypes of experience, these new parameters of identity within this lifetime, then it is very easy for us to attach to these new states of mind. So just as we are attached to the old one, the better the filter is, the more we like to attach to it and say, yeah, that's me, baby. Look at that guy who loves life and thinks the world is one and knows how the causal mechanisms of the world manifest. And so that is a state of mind. Be it right or wrong, it is the filter through which you are manifesting. But whenever we attach to those filters, they are doomed to change. And when we lose something that we're attached to, when we lose something that we love, it causes suffering. And so the idea is to go further and further back into the very essence of our being and to attach to something that cannot be changed, the nature of change itself. For within that state of infinite power, as we begin to let go of these spatio-temporal conscious creations within the infinite karmic cycle of now, and when we begin to lay the foundation of our being on the formless, luminiferous ether that drives change, when we let go of the things that we have changed and become the change, the only thing that never changes, then we no longer become the reactive beings that are doomed to these endless cycles of karmic suffering that we've been exposed to and that we've been born into. So, as we begin this spiritual exploration, this journey of the spirit, which I'm sure everybody here has already begun. If you're listening to me, you're obviously interested in these things, or if you're in this conversation. And so, within my experience, I've experienced this a lot, which is why I'm sharing it, is that the greater understanding I have, the easier it is for me to attach to that understanding and that state of mind. And as we create these expanded dimensions of experience within our meditations and our understanding, it is important to develop the vocabulary to relate that experiences to those we love. Because as we create these experiences, if we have the inability to relate those experiences, it creates the illusion of isolation, of separation. We want people to relate to us, especially when it's good, juicy stuff that's really having a positive effect on our lives, and we want to share it with those we love. And so if we're unable to communicate this new state of being, and then we create this isolated persona of, oh, well, you just don't understand because, God, I've had these crazy experiences because that's who I am. And we just create this expanded spiritualized ego, an expanded attachment, because it's still attached to the forms, the creations, instead of the creative process. The creative process of correlating the underlying law of the archetypes of experience that evolve into this ever-expanding, co-created, conscious matrix. And so as we go into these experiences, they say, there's a quote, it says, as you go into the experience of the formless, as you go and delve into these mysteries, they call it Zen, the state of no mind, where you dissolve the filter and become into an empowered state of creation, then you become Zen. Now, enlightenment is taking that Zen and bringing it back to the collective consciousness, bringing it back to our daily interactions. and being able to share and express that as who you are within this moment. And I'd just like to end by saying that all these things that I'm trying to describe, the archetypes of experience and how we relate to the development of our identities, none of this is an absolute truth. This is my way of experiencing it. This is my way of expressing it. But as it evolves, because I'm probably going to learn more from you guys than you from me, it gives us a new capacity of co-creation. A new experience of the world where we are not just talking and understanding ourselves as one infinite beings of consciousness with unlimited potential, but we are living it every single day within the here and now. Whew. All right. And with that said, I'd like to end tonight's discussion there. And now we got a little time for some Q&A. If you guys would like to ask any questions about something I said or concepts, we can try and clarify.
Thank you, Joe. Wow, there was so much in there. I think I caught maybe a fraction. So I'm really excited to have some more seminars and hopefully break down some of these concepts for those of us who really haven't delved too much into the lingo.
Absolutely. I think that's...
I wanted to go back to, I felt like a theme was how you were studying the tarot, the history of tarot, and the concept of the archetype.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted a little more clarification, and maybe I think because you were kind of talking pretty fast in the beginning, can you repeat your definition of the archetype or how you are using it?
Yeah, absolutely. So an archetype is, it symbolizes a state of being through which we experience reality. So an archetype would be like the filter through which we experience the now. And so it's a characteristic of different states of being. So like the Fool is a tarot card, and that is representative of a state of being in which you are in a state of unknowing, in which you are open to new information. And just like that state of being, we create these multi-dimensional experiences within every moment, and we cross-correlate them. And as that happens, there's a basic fundamental laws through which we develop the human experience. In religious context, there are the 10 highest angels known as the seraphim. These seraphim are representative of archetypes. They're represented in the spheres, in the tree of life, and they are the 10 celestial states of being through which we understand God. And you can know in the Old Testament, the word got translated to seraphs. And just this would go into deeper dimensions of experience than I was talking about. I was giving a very basic example, which is probably why you didn't understand it. I was trying to explain the archetype with like the attached correlation of the word green and the visual of the green. But these archetypes tend to go much, much deeper within our emotional and other intertwined levels like love. And so like mother, the idea of the mother, that is an archetype of creation, archetype of fertility, an archetype of love. And so we create these symbols of experience, and these symbols of experience interrelate to become the filter of our reality. And we can go through different filters based on the archetypes that we are attached to within that moment.
Great, so thank you. That helps a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wanted...
And
I was going to say, I wanted to go a lot deeper into some of the concepts, but I was a little nervous, so I kind of brushed over a lot of them.
that's fine. That kind of leads me to my next question. It seems like as human beings, you're talking about this essential awareness, like this the essential human experience, and then we vacillate through different states of perception, characterized by the archetypes.
Mm-hmm.
And so we could be in like the state of being a fool, or we could be in a state of being permanent. And so we vacillate through these different states of experience. Would you say, with this understanding that, when people are born, are they born predominantly associated with certain archetypes? And even though we all kind of have this elemental human experience of reality, do you think that we are each born with like stronger filters, like we have our stronger archetypes that we more associate with or tend to?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we're born, we see this as the beginning of a new parameter. So it's a new beginning and an end. So even though you're infinite, you have the new parameter called the attachment of a new of new archetypes. However, that doesn't mean that every experience you've already had isn't always still present within you. And so, like when I was talking about the multi-dimensional layers of experience, so we're all infinite beings. There's no end or no beginning. This karmic cycle has been going for infinity. And so that's within the construct of Maya and duality, it probably starts with the creation of Lucifer and the Luciferian dimension of duality. But when we're talking about the archetypes of the characteristics that we're born with, we still have so many subconscious dimensional layers outside of our experience. And we're just fine-tuning into this new, very dense reality, a new, very, very narrow parameter of experience. And so there's no telling where the fractal of your experience has come from, because we're all fractals of this formless, this infinite frequency. And by fractals, I mean that we are our own boundaries within an infinite spectrum. And so even though we're fixated within the boundary of this lifetime, we still have all of those infinite characteristics associated within us based on the karma of our infinite past.
Do you think it's possible to experience life like transcended from these archetypal states of perception and awareness? And is that what you're saying maybe would be the key to enlightenment, or is that not connected?
Yeah, absolutely. It's to no longer see yourself as the archetypes, but the creator of archetypes. So we have all these filters through which we're experiencing reality, but when we begin to understand enlightenment, as in when we begin to understand Bodhi, when we begin to understand the causal mechanisms through which we develop these attachments, through which we develop these filters, these archetypes, then we begin to let go of their control on us. No longer is this who I am, because if that was who I am, I would have to react a certain way. But when I know that I am none of those experiences, that I am none of those things that have been created and experienced in the now, that I am actually change itself, the direction of those experiences, then it frees us up from potential limitations that previous attachments have put us in.
Great. I have more questions, but I'll open it up in case anyone else wants to ask anything. I wanted to, because I have some questions, Judy, because we're totally aware of my focus was throughout the talk, really interesting perception, like, thanks for bringing that up. And just trying to, hone in and, bring it home. So, in that conversation of, archetypes,
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's, trying to, trying to understand that, we're born the way that we're.
Mm-hmm. 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 I see what you're saying. So, as you begin to expand your awareness, you begin creating conflict with others that have, uh, like, um, conflicting views. Is that kind of what you're saying? Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. And um, when it comes to that, I think there's only two ways to get them to relate to you. You can either lower yourself to their frequency, to their perception, or you can bring them up to yours through understanding, through communication. When we share our words, we're sharing our archetypes. Right now, I'm sharing the archetype of my filter with you guys through my words, through my symbology. And the reason we create so many clashes is because whenever we become emotionally charged within an argument, this happened just the other night. Me and my sister got in this huge argument around a sensitive topic, and we both had differing views, and it was very important to us that the other person really understood and related to our views, and became very heated and emotionally charged. And the important thing to understand is when we're debating these differing views, and all of a sudden we begin to create these emotional stimuli because they're conflicting with our understanding and the reality that we're trying to generate. What we're defending is not the truth. Like I said, all the truth is in the experience. We're defending our identity to the argument that we're attached to. I was attached to this certain argument. I saw it as me, so if she disagreed with it, she disagreed with who I was. And exactly, and the idea is to dissolve our identity with our mental constructs. So that we're no longer emotionally charged when somebody, or when we perceive that somebody is attacking them or diminishing them, because that's not who we are. So we don't have to get mad if somebody is trying to diminish something that we understand through a new space. And when we can share that, when we can totally change the dynamic of the conversation, where we're like, look at where we're coming from, and create a higher dimensional conversation of relating, then we can transform any conversation. But first we have to detach from our emotional stimuli that is associated with the argument that we are seeing as ourselves, which is why it's so important for us to defend it. Awesome. All right, is that all the questions then? Well, I would just like to, yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So, one of the most practical things you can do is just study it, learn more about it. When you change the way you see things, the things you see will literally change. And so, we have these we're beings of habit, and we have these conditioned neural patterns. We literally condition the structure of our neural pathways to create the reality we perceive. And so, in order to create the reality of unity, in order to create the reality of empowerment, then you have to create the conditions that manifest that experience in your life. You have to create the conditions of detachment. You have to step out of the constantly, the constant distractions of our culture and of our society. The reason I was able to study all these so deeply is because I had very detached parts of my life where I would just live in hermitage for a really long time, and I wouldn't see anybody. And in that state, I was removed from other people's impressions. It's like one of the other questions, you were constantly hitting up against these other negative archetypes that we resonate with, and we're constantly reinforcing those within our reality. So the most important thing you can do is to begin to bring yourself into the environments that will then condition this new experience in your reality. And the more you understand it, the more interesting it'll be. The more fascinating it becomes. And so the two major things you can do is just learn about yourself. You know, there's whether it's New Age metaphysical philosophy or ancient Sanskrit, whatever you want to read. Just never stop studying the self. Life is an ever evolving lesson. And so there's no limit to the amount of information you can learn. And the second one is just to create the experience so that you're free from exterior stimuli and you're just able to be present with the filter that you already have. Just able to be present with what your reality is coming through. And as you condition that experience, as you detach and condition practices that help you detach, whether it's yoga or tai chi or qigong or meditation or even exercises, as long as you continually condition these states of detached being within your life, then you will condition new neural pathways through which to understand life. And so the most important thing is to just separate yourself from the onslaught of stimuli that is our convoluted culture, and to step back into who you are, into that stillness of your archetype, the stillness that is present within your memories. And then from that state, and by conditioning yourself to have new ways of seeing it, to expanding the experience of yourself so that you literally see yourself differently. Through the study and the experience, you'll create you'll slowly condition a balanced way of manifesting that in your everyday life so that you're no longer reactive to the stimuli that's constantly bombarding you, because you've already preconditioned the neural pathways. You preconditioned that reality before you went back into the dissonance. Mm-hmm. All right, so I just want to end by thanking everybody that came tonight. This was a really great experience for me. I'm usually not much of going out and just talking. I want to really thank Gigi for putting this all together. I think you're amazing, and I think everybody on this call is amazing. And it was great to talk to you guys, and it was amazing to have the opportunity to talk about the things that I'm most passionate about. So I just wanted to give out a big thanks. Namaste. Awesome. And I also just wanted to say one last thing. The blog is also, we'll be posting just a place to share random uplifting memes or whatever. Like I said, just to condition these ideas and these states of thought into our everyday reality. You go on there, little uplifting quote for the day. And if you guys want to post any questions for any further discussion on the next talk, or what you want to talk about, then just throw any comments or preferences on there. Seminar of Light. Either me or Gigi has to add you to it, so just let me know and I'll add you. Yeah. Mhm. Mhm. I'm talking about the stimuli that you generate. So I'm talking about like when somebody says something to you and all of a sudden you get angry. Instead of saying, "Oh, I'm angry, I am this emotional state," it's to to study yourself, to go deeply into every moment, to go deeply into every emotional stimuli and say, why am I angry? Where is this anger coming from? And that's what I mean by studying the self. I mean by not taking any experience you have as at face value as who you are, but going deeper into every emotional stimuli that comes out of you, following, tracing back the clues of your own suffering to find the source. Because we create our suffering and we create our joy, and we can follow either back to the source of our creation, where we manifest these experiences. And when we get to the source, we can relive them from a new, expanded state of view once we have this new expanded understanding, both linear and nonlinear. So once, like when you understand the secret, all of a sudden you experience things differently because you know that you're manifesting your life. It's a shift in the way you see things, and vice versa. You can go deeper into every emotional stimuli, every reactive nature within your characteristics, and study it, see where it comes from, because it all comes from the same source. And when you go back into your own being and further identify and become more familiar with that source, then you become less reactive. So no longer will the anger just pop up, or even if something does make you angry, there's space around it. So you aren't that anger, but there's an expression of anger. Mm-hmm. All right, is everybody off?